Hi fans, please like our video and subscribe to the RotoWire channel. Then please go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.
Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm Clay Link, alongside RotoWire.com's lead prospect writer, James Anderson. Our second go at this, James. We are re-recording after some technical difficulties earlier in the day. James, I know this is not an ideal way to spend your Wednesday night, re-recording with me, but that just wasn't going to stand. We couldn't stand for that. So back at it, round number 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's a second take, so hopefully our analysis will be even sharper second time around.
Yeah, I feel like mine was not on point anyway, so maybe this is a blessing in disguise. But James, our main topic of discussion is Monday's RotoWire Magazine mock draft, which was a lot of fun. Quite a few takeaways, too, and really I'd done a few, like 12-teamers in terms of mocks. Thankfully, I was invited to do a few, but this is my first 15-team mock, so this was kind of a little bit of a rude awakening in the late rounds, just picking through the scraps, trying to find a few diamonds in the rough. I think I did that, and we'll talk about a lot of them, but I mentioned in the draft room I always go back and cringe at some of these picks, and I feel like this year will be no different, but this is really where you find who you like, who you don't, and kind of where you stand on a lot of guys relative to others.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was actually more prepared for this year's magazine mock than I have ever been in the past, because I kind of, like, just with the quarantine and the lack of, like, first pitch Arizona and stuff like that, I've just had more time to really kind of dig in on redraft stuff, and I put out the super early top 400 after doing a couple 15-team draft champions, so I felt pretty prepared. I sort of knew going in what I was probably going to end up doing, and it was still tough. It's a really loaded room, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, those endgame picks are pretty fascinating, and we'll see how they look. I mean, not even this time next year, but come March or April, whenever the season gets underway, we'll see which one of those guys. I mean, there may be some guy who skyrockets there. There may be some guys who aren't even playing in the big leagues who are drafted. So we'll see. James, by the way, our draft content launched, and your first-year player draft analysis, and a lot of content coming up soon. Do you want to explain a little bit about that? And we'll maybe talk more about it at the end. But I did want to mention that because the draft rollout for 2021 has begun.
Yeah, the draft kit for those who do redraft is up and ready to roll. I am working on the first-year player draft content for those of you in dynasty leagues. I know most dynasty leagues aren't going to do the first-year player draft this year until at least after January 15th, when a lot of these guys are going to sign. But got a lot of preview stuff for that should be up on the site before the end of the year. But yeah, I mean, just in general, there's a lot of great stuff up right now that's worth checking out.
Absolutely. Jeff's projections, my top 300, which I definitely battle tested in this mock draft. Also, your prospect rankings and Ian Kahn's dynasty rankings. Batting orders, which were cleaned up, ready to roll, closers and waiting, a lot of good stuff. So definitely sign up if you haven't yet and check all that out. This is just the first wave of content, too. Mentioned that during the first take of the show, but there will be more outlooks, more content added almost every day from now through draft season. But James, let's talk a little bit about this magazine mock draft from Monday. I said it was 15 teams. I'll just run through the list here in the order of those who drafted. So Derek Van Riper, our good friend, leading things off. I have to thank Derek for most of my early breaks in the biz. He knows that. I appreciate that, but I feel like I don't tell him that enough. So just wanted to say that. Steve Gardner of USA Today. Jeff Erickson, of course, of RotoWire. Eric Karabell of ESPN. Eddie Almager, Prospects Live. Ian Kahn of The Athletic and RotoWire. Greg Ambrosius of the NFBC. Then Ryan Bloomfield picking 8th of Baseball HQ. Jason Collette of RotoWire and Fangraphs. Paul Sporer, at Sporer, of course you know him. You, 11-12. Jeff Zimmerman picking 13th, and then Brett Sayer, 14th. and Todd Zola finishing things off. So any surprises early on in this draft for you?
No, I mean, it was too sharp of a room for anything wild to be happening early on. I even tweeted before the draft got underway that I expected to get some combination of Story and Yelich with my first pick, and some combination or one or the other of Lucas Giolito and Luis Castillo with my second pick, and that went like exactly how I thought it was going to go. Kind of, I'm not saying like I crushed the draft, but it did unfold pretty much exactly how I thought it would.
I know you said previously that you have Trevor Story in that kind of Big 12, and I don't, because I really just fear the Colorado Rockies are going to kind of fold it in and say, hey, we're having some troubles moving Nolan Arenado in this massive deal. Let's try to cash in on Story. And the road numbers, for his career, not great, but he could land, as you've suggested, maybe in New York or another favorable hitting environment. And he's going to run, so it's hard to see that being a bad pick. But I am a little bit lower on Story. In fact, have him in the second round. I went with Shane Bieber, Bryce Harper, Flaherty, Springer as a top 4. Then I was kind of panicking a little bit. It is a mock draft, but wondering where the heck I'm going to get my speed. Bryce is going to run a little bit. I got Jose Altuve, Tommy Edmond, Leody Taveras, but it was kind of a situation where after round 4, I knew I was going to be light in the category. It's just how much can I make up, and how much do I want to try to make up? What was your approach with speed beyond Trevor Story?
Well, my general strategy for 15-team leagues this year is that I'm probably not going to take a position player in the first 10 rounds or so that I don't think can get me double-digit steals. The one guy that I do kind of have circled, who I would take in the third round if he fit my team, is Eloy Jimenez, and he obviously is not going to steal bases, but in general, like I am going after outfielders and middle infielders and pitchers really in those first 10 rounds. I mean, there are a few exceptions, but generally that's where you're getting your speed. And I do think you have to attack pitching pretty aggressively in the first 8 to 10 rounds. And that's what I did. I went Trevor Story, Tim Anderson, Ketel Marte as my first 3 hitters, had 5 pitchers on board before I took my 4th hitter, and that was Will Myers, and then followed that up with Ramon Laureano. So, I mean, it won't all break this way, but it could break that all 5 of my first hitters steal double-digit bases, and a couple of those guys might steal 20-plus. So that's sort of how I am attacking it, if at all possible.
So you kind of take exception to the George Springer, Pete Alonso tandem I picked up. At least you're not going to be targeting guys like that in those ranges, or in this range, because they don't get you any steals. And I can see that. I do think Pete Alonso, maybe not head and shoulders, but a head up on a lot of those first base types. You kind of want to wait at first base generally?
It's mostly just that I love some of the values late. Like a lot of the guys that popped for me when I was doing my early prep were late first basemen. Like I love Rowdy Tellez. I did not expect Eddie Almaguer to take him in the 14th round. That was probably the highest he's gone in an NFBC draft so far. I love Brandon Belt, Carlos Santana, Garrett Cooper, Nate Lowe, all those guys going outside of the top 300. I'd be fine starting any of those guys in a 15-team league. And I think, they're not going to, I love Pete Alonso. I think he's going to have a better year than he did last year. I love Luke Voit, but I loved Luke Voit last year when I was getting him everywhere, like in the 200s. He's not as exciting to me if I have to use a 4th or 5th round pick on him. Just because the 3 category guys, like Pete Alonso, Luke Voit, Matt Olson, all really good players, but they're guys who in standard 5x5 are basically 3 category guys. They're going to help you in home runs, RBI, runs. They're not going to win you batting average. They're not going to do anything stealing bases. So I think the 3 category guys are the guys that you can pound in those middle rounds. You're not going to get the same amount of home runs as you are going to get from Alonso Not the same amount of count stats you're going to get from Luke Voigt if he stays healthy and everything. But I don't think you can pass up those early picks. That's the only place where you can get the hitters who you can reliably bank on for power and speed without killing your batting average.
You make a really good point, and I hear everything you're saying. I feel like the price is on, like Pete Alonso. I also drafted Paul Goldschmidt, Christian Walker. He was a late guy and kind of fits into that same mold you were just talking about. But I do find, or I'm finding at least early on in this draft season, that the prices on Pete Alonso and Paul Goldschmidt, I think, are cost effective. I like Goldie this year just as a guy who's lost all of his shine. He's not going to run anymore, but going to hit for a high average, maybe some more power still in there than he's shown in recent years. So yeah, I get what you're saying at first. I just liked some of those middle values. I think Alonso, I mean, everything was fine with him. It was just kind of a small sample variance. He's going to hit for elite power. But yeah, the stolen base contributors on my team, Altuve, I still think he's going to chip in some bags because the sprint speed is still 89th percentile. So I feel like I can count on him for some. Tommy Edmond, I know you've been an Edmond fan. Leody Taveras. Then it gets pretty thin. Colton Wong. Do you think if I'm in like a main event scenario that I just don't have enough speed, or do you think I have enough to at least hang around, maybe add somebody in fab, or is this approach just not going to work in an overall prize contest?
I think it can work. I think if you get if Colton Wong bounces back to like 2019 levels and Leody Taveras hits like 240, both those things could happen. I mean, I think you're totally fine in speed if that happens. I do like Tommy Edmond. It's kind of annoying to me that Edmond is not getting discounted at all compared to where he was going last year, even though he had a down year. So I was kind of hoping that
positional eligibility is pretty great.
He does. He has the best positional eligibility on the board.
Does he have 4 position in NFBC?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, that part's nice, but I mean, so I think we also had a strategy difference a little bit on the pitching side. To me, I'm not as worried about your stolen bases as I am just like your. I would have approached pitching a little bit differently. You and I approached it the exact same through the first 4 rounds. We both left the first 4 rounds with 2 pitchers we really like. I got Lucas Giolito and Zach Gallen in the second and fourth. You got Shane Bieber in the first and Jack Flaherty in the third. But then I went for one of the big closers in Aroldis Chapman, and then Sandy Alcantara and Pablo Lopez all within the first 8 rounds. And then I really went after hitting, whereas you kind of went after hitting after getting Flaherty, and then we're going after the pitchers kind of in the middle round.
Yeah, I'm kind of okay getting 2 locked-in guys that I feel like are aces, and I still feel like Flaherty's in that range, and then kind of waiting off and picking up at the end. I do want to get 2 really good relievers. Now, I got 2 guys who aren't necessarily locked into the closer role in James Krinchak and Devin Williams, but these are 2 of the best relievers in the game. If they get the role, they could take off, and these could both be tremendous values. And while we haven't seen it with Krinchak, I mean, they cut Brad Hand. They non-tendered him when he had or I guess they declined an option that was very reasonable. Maybe they bring him back at a reduced cost, but this team does not seem to be adding expensive pieces, this Cleveland team. So I feel like Krinchak's pretty much a lock to slide in, and I also feel like Devin Williams should be a closer in the big leagues. We'll see if it happens. I like Marco Gonzalez, who I got on the starting pitching side. Tony Gonsolin's one of my favorite targets. Kwang Hyun Kim of St. Louis, really good year. Not a ton of Ks, but I like him. Yusei Kikuchi, Daniel Bard I got as a third closer, Justice Sheffield. So I feel like there's not a ton separating the Chris Paddocks of the world. I'm not a big Paddock guy at all. I'm trying to look at who else was in this range of starting pitchers. David Price. Price is okay. Montas has questions. I just feel like that range is kind of up in the air. And so maybe I'll pick what's left after those names are off the board. McCullers.
The reason I don't the reason why I went the way I did is because I think that's like a range I just don't like taking a pitcher in, a starting pitcher, because I just think the quality of pitcher you're getting from rounds like 11 through 18. I mean, I don't love all the pitchers that go in there, but I can find one in every round who I think is about as good as the one that went the round before them. I think everyone gets to that point after they've loaded up on the hitters where they're like, all right, time to go get pitching. And then it just like, I like Marco Gonzalez a lot, but the fact that he has to be taken in the 12th round is a statement of how quickly pitching dries up. And just the fact that he can be trusted to throw 6 innings every start pushes him up into this range. But like, I got Herman Marquez in like the 16th round. I would take him over lots of pitchers who went like a few rounds ahead of him. That's not to say that like that Marquez pick was a steal, but I just think inevitably there's going to be a guy I like in round 16, round 17, round 18, who I like just as much as whoever I would have taken in round 12 or round 13.
Yeah, another good point. And I love you, buddy. I just differ with you on this because I feel like Marco Gonzalez does not get enough love. And for an example, you took Randall Grichuk right before I took Marco Gonzalez, and Gonzalez has won a ton of games past couple years, and I'd rather take a guy like that than an outfielder like Grichuk, who I don't know if there's a lot separating him from a guy like Kirilloff, who I got later. I mean, maybe Kirilloff takes off, Benintendi, Schwarber. So I just in that range, I don't really like a ton of the hitters. So I am kind of wanting to give Marco and Tony Gonsolin. I think Gonsolin, just because people know the Dodgers and how they handle things on the pitching side, don't expect him to handle a full workload, and you don't expect a full 200-inning workhorse workload. But 150 innings from Tony Gonsolin in the 13th round, I love that. I mentioned Kirilloff. I know you were kind of like, whoa, he's already off the board. I kind of caught you by surprise taking him in the 15th. Do you think there's room for him to push up quite a bit higher in the draft board as we get closer to opening day?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jared Kelenic and Alex Kirilloff are definitely going to just keep kind of gradually rising up boards. As soon as we get to spring training, people are going to just be losing themselves over like slow-mo vids of these guys hitting home runs and stuff, and they're going to be going inside the top 200, and they're probably going to go like Kelenic probably is going to climb to around like 100, 125, and then if it starts. People start reporting that he could like break camp and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden it might go inside the top 100. So I think you're still getting pretty good values on those two guys. Kirilloff just had a heck of a summer in St. Paul, and they obviously rewarded him on the highest stage that the Twins ever get to, the first round of the playoffs. And, I think that was a big kind of, I mean, I think I talked about with you, maybe some other people, like the Eddie Rosario non-tender was not that surprising. It's a shame that it wasn't surprising, but it just wasn't really surprising. And especially when you have a guy like Kirilloff sort of that's ready, that's waiting in the wings. So, I think he spends the vast majority of the year in the big leagues. I would rather have Randall Grichuk than Alex Kirilloff. Pretty clearly
too, but I feel like in the 12th, I don't know. I don't hate it, but looking into him, he did gain a lot in terms of the K percentage. He cut that down, but I don't know. I feel like we've seen a lot of him, and the book's kind of out, so I don't see a lot separating him from the outfielders who went a little bit lower. But yeah, Kirilloff, the fact that they brought him in with the season on the line and asked him to kind of save the organization. And then they've talked a lot about how good he looked at the alternate site and how much faith they have in Kirilloff. So I like him. Kelenic went in the 14th round, so yeah, I think that'll only tick up from there. By the way, you kind of mentioned when we first recorded the show that, and you made a good point, that it's great to do a mock draft and you kind of pass on closers, and because you don't want to be the guy who in print reach for some closer. But when push comes to shove and you have money in the line, you got to cover your bases and fill up those categories. And I was thinking, when you said that, I think when push comes to shove, if I were doing this draft, picking 11th and I got Bieber, knowing that I had to get steals, maybe I would have taken Adalberto Mondesi over Bryce Harper, which is a crazy thing to say because, well, not crazy, but like in real life standards, Bryce is a really productive hitter. Mondesi far more valuable in rotisserie than he is in real life, but as far as a hitter goes. But I feel like the roto impact, Adalberto Mondesi is a unicorn, and I may, if I'm chasing an overall contest, push him up over some of these other names, and I guess I have to change my rankings on the site to reflect that.
Yeah, the only 3 hitters I would have been considering in your spot there would have been Harper, Mondesi, and Bichette. And those were the 3 hitters that went. Mondesi went right after you took Harper. I think Mondesi's going to be going at the turn, probably in the main event. Yeah, he's just, like you said, he's such a unicorn. Don't get sidetracked by looking at his approach and thinking that he's going to lose playing time or anything like that. Like, you kind of have to accept him for what he is. He's not Billy Hamilton. He's better than that. Mm-hmm. The Royals clearly have him locked in as part of their future, and there's room for growth. I mean, even if he just kind of did what he did last year, you'd take that in the second round, just given the stolen base output. But I mean, he could get better. So I'm totally with you. I think Mondesi, like, if you go ace, Mondesi, ace, that really frees you up to kind of do whatever you want later in the draft.
Yeah, and that's what I've learned throughout the years is kind of what I want to do with each pick is just keep my options open with each subsequent pick. And taking a guy like Mondesi checks so many boxes, he could finish with as the number 1 overall player pretty easily. And people have it in his mind that he kind of had a bad year because he got off to such a slow start, but 6 homers and 24 bags in 59 games. You just don't see that. So getting a guy like that, I think if my money were on the line, I may take Mondesi, which, it's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're playing Roto, I think it's the right call. Now, do you feel like you had to take Aroldis Chapman in retrospect in the 6th round, or do you think you could have covered saves a different way?
Well, I wanted to approach the draft like I did have money on the line.
I tried to too, but
yeah, like, look, in hindsight, I did not have to take Chapman there because I got 2.5 more closers who I like plenty later in the draft, and Craig Kimbrell in the 13th, Richard Rodriguez in the 18th, and Lucas Sims in the 20th. Sims is I'm giving him like a half closer notation right now. I think he at least will get some saves, but if I knew I was going to get those 3 where I got them, I definitely would not have taken Chapman there. But in a real draft with money on the line, Chapman's going to go ahead of where I took him. Kimbrell's going to go ahead of where I took him. Richard Rodriguez is going to go ahead of where I took him. So this is not a realistic way for things to play out if there was cash on the line. But I did, I was picking sort of towards the 15 turn. And so I took Chapman in round 6 with it heading back, knowing that was going to be kind of the closer run. Liam Hendricks goes, Edwin Diaz goes, Raisel Iglesias goes before he gets back to me. So I knew Chapman is kind of my, like, I think Chapman and Hader are the top 2 guys for me this year. And Hader went in the 4th round. So I just love the kind of security that you kind of get with Chapman. I mean, you're drafting closers for saves, and he's going to get you saves. So I was fine taking him there, but yeah, in hindsight, I did not have to take him there just due to the way this mock played out.
Yeah, no, when we co-managed the main event team last year, we targeted guys who were crappy closers in the role, and that didn't really pan out for us, James. Seems like you're going back to that well, which I respect. I kind of want to, as I said, Karinchak, Devin Williams, 2 of my favorite targets in all of fantasy right now, because I'm kind of swinging the other way where I just want the skills, and these guys are just so close to the role where I'd love to get those 2 guys. Then I got Daniel Bard, who does have the role and kind of fits that just having the job mentality.
Well, I don't think us getting crappy closers didn't work out last year. I mean, we did.
I mean,
like, saves
after we lost Wade Davis. Well, we lost Wade Davis, and who was our other? Kinsler and somebody. Well, we got Pomeranz.
Yeah.
So
and we had, I think, I don't know, whatever. But the 2 things on Karinchak and Williams I don't like that Williams ended the year with a shoulder injury. I know that they cleared his designation. They're basically saying he's healthy. I don't take teams at their word on that type of stuff. And then with Karinchak, it's the walks. Like I'd put it at like 90% confidence that he opens the year in that role. And to me, like it's just not enough for me to take him where he's going. Even though I do acknowledge that Karinchak and Williams both have like top 5 closer upside pretty easily.
Yeah, I do feel like Cleveland could bring back Hand, but the fact that they non-tendered him before makes me think that they're just going to move on and go mostly with the pieces they have already on the team. But yeah, that shoulder injury with Williams is a little scary. How did you approach second base? I saw the position drying up and needed speed, so Altuve was a logical fit. How did you tackle that position?
I didn't have a plan necessarily going in, but my plan to target middle infielders and outfielders who could be kind of across the board contributors. I just figured I'd end up with a second baseman. I wasn't sure which one. I would have happily taken Altuve if I had missed out on Ketel Marte. I was going to take one of those guys there probably, or I might have waited for someone like Jake Cronenworth or something like that. But I saw, like, looking back, that second base and third base are the two offensive positions other than catcher that I think dry up the quickest. Like once Edwin Rios is off the board and like Joey Wendell and those guys are off the board around pick 300, just a little bit after that, then there's pretty much nobody I want at those positions. Like Luis Urias, I'd be fine if he's like my last hitter on my bench or something. But I really think you got to get your second baseman and your third baseman within the top 300, and ideally get guys who are also eligible at those positions to just kind of give you a backup option there, because it just dries up so quickly to me at those two spots. And looking back, I went after all those first basemen I love late, and just kind of banking on the fact that one of them would be my util, one would be my corner, and hopefully one would work out and be my starting first baseman. But if I could do it over, I would have taken Joey Wendell in the 22nd round over Nate Lowe, who at that point was my fourth guy eligible at first base, just because I ended the draft without a backup at third to Austin Riley or at second base to Ketel Marte.
Yeah, those are some tough positions to figure out, because second base seemed like it was kind of deep, or getting kind of deep a few years ago. Now pretty top heavy and definitely falls off a cliff. Third base, I got a guy who I know I actually don't know how you feel about him anymore, but Jeimer Candelario.
Yep, I like him too.
Oh, do you? Okay, cool. I know we kind of differed on Rowdy, but I do kind of like Jeimer as not like a huge breakout guy, but a guy who could be a nice little filler piece.
Can I give my quick case for Rowdy?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I got to make it on the first pod, and so he basically cut his strikeout rate in half last year, which, like, Jared Walsh is the other guy who kind of did that. And Walsh seems to be getting a bit more buy-in from people than Rowdy. But I think Rowdy's got just as secure of a job as Walsh does. I mean, I think you're going to see him and Vlad in the lineup every day. It's not going to give him a ton of positional flexibility. Like, they're not going to be able to give Teoscar a ton of starts at DH. Maybe Rowdy sits against some lefties, but I mean, he's just going to be hitting right in the middle of that lineup every day against righties, and I just think he's going to do a ton of damage. So I was hoping that people wouldn't get on him too much. I have seen some hype for him, but Eddie, the three biggest snipes for me in this draft were Rowdy Tellez by Eddie in the 14th, and then you got the other two. Kirilloff wasn't a snipe because I didn't even realize you'd taken him until a couple rounds later, and then you got Yusei Kikuchi on me.
I was expecting a text after the Kikuchi one, and I got one within a few minutes.
I do
like him as a sleeper. By the way,
Candelario.
Go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to mention because I didn't yet that you have input sleepers on in the RotoWire admin. So those are up on the site, rotowire.com/baseball/sleepers.php, I believe it is. You can also just search RotoWire MLB Sleepers. But yeah, those are all your picks, and nearly every one of them has outlooks. So yeah, you were generous with your sleepers there, James. How did you handle catchers? Because I said that really weird. Catchers, because I paid up for one in Sean Murphy, and then kind of went toward the bottom of the barrel there. Not necessarily in Tyler Stevenson. He could be a breakout guy, but Elias Diaz, maybe just a stream in at home. You went cheap with both of your guys. Was that a plan coming in?
Sort of. There was probably a breaking point where I would have taken guys like Sean Murphy or James McCann or Dalton Varsho or Mitch Garver. But I never got to the point where I could pull the trigger, and I don't want to force it at catcher. And I don't want to take catchers who I didn't plan on going after and then just like, oh, I can't believe he's still there, I'm going to take him. Like, I really want to use those first like 15 to 20 picks on players that either have a ton of upside or that I'm really confident in. And I'm just not that confident in any catcher other than JT Realmuto. So it's not how I want to use my resources. If you hit on one, then it's a good pick. But I think the one thing where I think people kind of get themselves trapped, it kind of reminds me of like mid-tier prospects where like a lot of people just look at a guy and say like, oh, he's like the 55th ranked prospect, he must be awesome. Most 55th ranked prospects bust, even though they're inside the top 100. Like that, there's just not a high probability of those guys hitting. And I think most catchers have a pretty high bust like percentage. Like none of these guys are super safe to me, especially in batting average leagues. I mean, they're like, Yasmani Grandal is safe in an LVP league, but I just don't like using my resources that way. I'm going to have probably the worst offensive production from catcher in this league, but I could also pick up this year's like Austin Nola off waivers, or this year's like Martin Maldonado or Pedro Severino or whatever. Like there are plenty of guys who go undrafted who can finish in the top 15 at catcher.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of want to treat it in a similar way to how I want to handle saves, and that I want to pay up for one option. Maybe a guy like Darno, he's not going to cost you top dollar, but maybe you spend a mid-round pick on Darno, who's had a couple good years. Varsho, you talked about maybe run quite a bit for a catcher, James McCann, perhaps, and then kind of go dumpster diving from there. All due respect to these players, I don't mean that they're in the dumpster, but I think with closers too, maybe I didn't get that one guy, but then I do feel confident in James Karinchak and Devin Williams. But then specking on Amir Garrett, you got Lucas Sims, I got Amir Garrett, Jonathan Hernandez. You got Zach Britton to back up Chapman, but you didn't seem that interested in just throwing darts on the closer side.
I think it's a position that like the saves are getting more and more spread out every single year, and it can be, I approach this draft a specific way. Like I love Craig Kimbrell this year. Like I think I've got him on all my teams so far. I think Richard Rodriguez is a great value where he's going. I mean, they'll both be going a lot higher in March, but Kimbrell just very quickly was kind of like the old version of Kimbrell down the stretch last year, if you were paying attention. So, and like his job security is up there with anyone. So, there's just guys I like in the middle rounds. There's not really anyone other than Lucas Sims who stands out to me as like I'm going to bet on the skills guy. Like I mentioned, like Giovanni Gallegos, like is a guy that kind of fits that mold to me, but they just have so many other options there. So it's just really the fact that I like some of these guys in the middle, and then I also do believe in getting one of the top guys if you can.
Nice, I respect that. I do always like kind of throwing a few darts here in the end game and maybe trying to get a free closer essentially. So yeah, I took Amir Garrett, Jonathan Hernandez. And some other guys in this range, Garrett Crochet, kind of interesting. Well, very interesting with that arm, but who knows if he's going to be closing. Definitely a speculative pick. Blake Trinan, some other guys in this range who could end up closers. Jeremy Jeffers. I guess you could say Tanner Houck kind of fits that mold, but he's probably going to be starting with that rotation in the state it's in, right?
Yeah, I took him expecting he'll be a starter all year. I think he earned that the way he finished last year. I wrote his outlook that's up on the site right now, and I kind of emerged a Tanner Houck optimist. It's not a bold statement given that he was dominant over 3 starts to close the year, but his slider is, I think it might be up there with a lot of the best sliders in the game. I think it's got the chance to be that kind of carrying pitch for a guy where he could maybe lean on it over 30% of the time. I love the situation. Like that rotation is just kind of not deep at all. So I think he will have a pretty long leash there. The command is a bit of an issue. Didn't really get to showcase the changeup very much, but he did not surrender a hit on his slider last year, which is interesting.
Yeah, so I threw some speculative darts on the relief side. Yours were mostly on the starting pitching side there in the reserve rounds. Cal Quantrill, Houck, Kyle Wright, Luis Patino. Patino struggled last year, but pretty good stuff, so we'll see what he can do. James, we have to talk about Wander Franco because we talked about Kelnick, obviously, and Kirilloff. Look, we love Wander Franco, don't we, folks? But I think this year the price is a little exorbitant. I liked him last year when it was just an end game pick, see what happens. Maybe he forces their hand. But there's a big difference between a mid-round pick and an end game pick. And I think this is just too much draft capital to invest a 15th round pick in a 15-team league for a guy who we know is kind of hurt right now. We don't know the exact state of his health, and we don't know if he's going to have a spot.
Right. I mean, I think we don't even like the performance aspect. Like, I don't think it's a lock that he would just kind of be an automatic top 100 guy if he did get the call. And then I don't really expect him to get the call till June at the earliest. This shoulder injury could not have really come at a worse time for him. I think it's going to affect his ability to get ready for spring training. It might prevent him from putting on the type of show in big league camp that he would need to be in the mix for an early promotion. So, I'm really pretty off Franco for redraft leagues right now. I think Derek nailed the 25th round pick of Jeter Downs. I would have loved to have made that pick. I mean, I think he could be up very early. I think the decks are pretty clear for him at second base in Boston. But Franco to me is going to be kind of you get him at a discount next year. Like that's sort of where this seems to be trending to me.
Yeah, I think in the end game you can absolutely speculate on some guys and play the stashing game. It's always stashing season on this podcast, but there is just a huge difference between players in the mid range and in the end game, and a lot of good players still on the board where Franco's going. So I'm probably out this year. Any other prospects catch your eye? I know. Listen, this is a really hard off season for you with no minor league games to evaluate players, so you're trying to write, and you're doing a great job, by the way, but you're evaluating some guys who you have no stats to base things off of. And one guy who's particular, he's not prospect eligible anymore, I don't believe, but one guy who's going to be really hard to judge, Michael Kopeck. Like, we haven't talked about him. We used to talk about him all the time on this show. How the heck do you treat Michael Kopeck for next year?
He is still eligible.
Is he?
Yeah, because he threw like less than 20 innings, I think, before needing Tommy John. So
I guess that makes sense.
I kind of am hands off at the moment. You want to see how he looks in camp. You want to see how he looks in games. How is he doing throwing strikes? I mean, he had really shaky control before the surgery, and I know he's more further removed from Tommy John surgery than maybe anyone ever, because he was basically ready last year and then opted to sit out the season. So now he should be super rested, but that doesn't mean they're going to let him go throw like 150 innings. So I think you got to expect them to manage him very carefully. It's not a lock that he is throwing enough strikes to be like he's the type of guy where he could shut down one of the best lineups in baseball over 6 innings and then get chased in the 3rd inning the next start. So I'm okay missing the boat if he ends up having a great year. I would just feel a lot more comfortable investing in 2021 or 2022, I should say, after I've seen him pitch since coming back from the surgery.
Yeah, because you just have no idea from a health perspective or a performance perspective what you're going to get there. So, yeah, Jason Collette took him and Michael Kopeck in the 18th. Definitely raised an eyebrow for me. It caught my attention. Collette followed up a few rounds later with TJ Antone, who did make your sleeper list. As a Reds fan, I love to see it. And, right now I think we have him, 6th on the depth chart. But they seem to be selling off some pieces, and I think at least one of Gray or Castillo will be gone. So I have no real questions about Antone at least opening in the rotation. I do have some questions.
You think Castillo could be good?
You haven't heard those rumors? I mean, there's been a lot of rumors.
Okay.
It's really a bummer, but
I'd love Castillo even more if he was gone. That'd be great. Like the one, I didn't draft him. I didn't really target him last year just because I remember just seeing his defense let him down just in brutal fashion several times the year before.
And that 2019 Reds defense.
I don't know.
Who was what was that guy's name? Forget him. He's no longer with
Josh
the team.
Van Meter.
Yes,
Van Meter.
thank you.
Yeah.
He was
Josh Van Meter plays a mean left field.
Van Meter winker outfield. That was rough.
Well, James, I want to talk about Andrew Vaughn really quick, since I took Vaughn in the 17th. Not as confident in Vaughn being up as early as Kirilloff and Kelenic, but I think he is the next guy, like after those two, where all the talk coming from that front office has basically been openly acknowledging that he could be the replacement to Edwin Encarnacion at DH. And it seemed like he really impressed a lot of people at the alternate site, and just kind of his natural trajectory developmentally. He probably would have debuted last year if it had been a full 162 game season. So there's a chance Vaughn could be up in April. And I don't expect him to hit for a high average. Like I would expect him to hit like maybe 250. But he's going to get on base a ton. He's going to hit for a ton of power. So yeah, I like Andrew Vaughn. If you miss out on like Kirilloff and Kelenic and you're looking for a prospect to roll the dice on.
Yeah, I was pretty jealous of that one and the Nate Lowe pick. So yeah, you loaded up there on first baseman in that range. Vaughn, Belt, Cooper, Lowe, and yeah, that approach on going cheap at that position may look really good when we look back at this. Just real quick note as far as overseas players, Ha-Seong Kim went pretty high, actually. Went in the 11th round to Paul Sporer. I really liked Todd Zola's pick of Na Sung Bum, who, when I was watching the Dinos every now and then, covering the KBO as part of the duties for the site earlier this year, every time I'd watch, he was just crushing. And I feel like, especially where he's going compared to Ha-Seong Kim, who's definitely getting some hype, I think Bum Na Sung Bum may be the better target. Also,
but isn't he like our age?
Maybe, but he's got a stick, man. I can hit. He may be a DH though. But I did want to mention the guy that Ian Kahn drafted, Tomoyuki Sugano. A pretty nice target. Sounds like he's going to have a lot of suitors, probably pitching for a contender. And you tweeted something about him recently, right? I forget what it was.
Yeah, I tweeted. I've been working on my first year player draft stuff. There's going to be a lot of that coming after Christmas, hopefully in between Christmas and the New Year. But Yeah, I just tweeted my top 12 in terms of international free agents. And yeah, Sugano's kind of right in the middle of the pack. Like, if it's a 20 team first year player draft, I think Sugano should probably go early second round. Eric Halterman has a great piece on the site about 8 guys from the KBO and NPB for 2021, and then 8 guys for future seasons for those of you in dynasty leagues. And Sugano, in his mind, compares pretty favorably to guys like Masahiro Tanaka, Kenta Maeda when they made the jump. So, he's not that interesting for dynasty, but if he just comes in and is a top 40 starter and you get that for like 4 or 5 years, that's pretty solid. So I like him more. I think we've seen guys like Sugano come over and have success much more often than we've seen guys like Sun Bum Na come over and have success. Like the KBO, like I'm kind of fence on Ha-Seong Kim just because it is a jump in competition for him. And the stolen base success rate, like he'll be running against catchers with better throwing arms over here. I'm not saying the pick was bad in the 11th, but I just, because of the speed factor, the fact that people think they might be getting a power speed guy, I think he's just going to be going higher, and I'm comfortable taking him.
Yeah, I feel like just given the uncertainty with him, people are drafting him with more certainty than I'm willing to bake in. I mean, maybe the major league equivalencies portend really good things, but I just, being as it's mostly sight unseen outside of maybe a few KBO games, I'm just looking at him and I'm hesitant to fully invest at the price. By the way, Na-Sung Bum, James, homer totals throughout the years in the KBO, all batting over 300, by the way, but 30, 28, 22, 24, 23, 4 because he missed most of 2019 with a knee injury, only playing in 23 games, and then 34. So I don't know. I think the back.
But if he'd been doing that in the PCL, would you care?
Probably not. He is 31, as you suggested. So he is not, in fact, my age quite yet. He's a little younger.
I do have some good news for you on the Reds front.
Oh yeah.
So I've been doing a ton of research on the guys who are going to sign on January 15th, which is the new July 2. It sounds like that's going to be an annual thing kind of going forward here, where it's on January 15th instead of July 2.
My birthday.
Big day. Well, you're going to get a birthday present because I think the Reds might have the best signing class this year.
That'd be a great present, honestly.
Yeah, they've got
some good news as a Reds fan.
I think they've got 5 guys that I'm going to put in my top 100 just from the international side alone. So, pretty nice haul. I know it's might be a rough season for you, but at least it seems like they sort of know what they're doing on that side of things now.
Yeah, and I don't want to be greedy as a Reds fan because they did spend $100 million last offseason, the most they've ever spent. But you hate to see them just shut the window after going for it once. That's kind of a bummer. It does seem like they're definitely shedding payroll. Maybe Moose is gone. I saw rumors with him. Maybe Luis and Sonny. It could be a total fire sale there with the Reds. Anything else on your mind, James? Anything you want to mention? Anything else first-year player draft related that's coming?
It's going to be a lot of stuff. The amateur board that's up there right now, that's going to be changed to the first-year player draft top 100. And so that'll include everyone from guys who were drafted this past year in the 2020 draft to guys who signed from the Dominican, Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, like that. They're all going to sign January 15th. And then you're also going to have the players that Eric touched on in his article coming over from the KBO and the NPB. So those guys will all be ranked in the same place. Most people aren't going to be doing their first year player drafts till after Clay's birthday, but that'll be up there. And then I'm going to do an article. I'm kind of excited for this article. It's basically, I'm going to go through like the first 100 picks. I mean, I might clump some picks together, but pick a spot. Like if you're picking 17th, like I'll say, here are the players that you should check to see if did they fall to you. If so, you take them. Should you trade this pick if certain players aren't there? Like I'm going to give you kind of all that for sort of pick by pick, kind of how I would approach each pick if it were me drafting.
That's going to be awesome, man. We'll look forward to that. Also, a programming note. Ian Kahn's going to join us on MLB Network Radio. He's going to join Todd Zola and myself to talk more about this mock draft. So we'll be talking with him the day after Christmas on MLB Network Radio if you get time. Otherwise, check it out on the app. Again, all of our draft content is up. The first wave of draft content. More to come. More added pretty much every day. So check it out. Also on the iOS store. You have an iOS device. And really, I want to apologize again to everybody who tried to listen to the show earlier. I did what I could. I'm not a sound professional, James. Did what I could. Hopefully this version's a lot better, and thanks for giving us another go. And take care. Hope you'll be with us next time on the RotoWire Prospect Podcast.